It started with a quiet night in the suburbs of Fresno, California, the kind of night where everything feels still, as if the world is holding its breath. David Velasquez was at home, scrolling through his phone with the TV on low in the background. His small, one-story house sat nestled at the end of a cul-de-sac, a place he had always considered safe. That sense of security was about to be shattered. He had installed security cameras 6 months prior, after a string of car break-ins hit his neighborhood. He never expected anything beyond raccoons or maybe a stray dog to set them off. But that night, something triggered the camera in his backyard. David's phone buzzed with an alert, and he pulled up the live feed out of habit. At first, he saw nothing unusual, just the faint outline of his yard under the dim security lights. But then, something moved at the edge of the frame. His heart skipped a beat. There, just beyond the porch light's reach, 2 slender figures appeared. They glided into view, almost floating, their movements unnervingly smooth. They were unlike anything David had ever seen. Their bodies were absurdly elongated, impossibly long legs, no discernible arms, and small, featureless heads that barely connected to their torsos. Their movements seemed wrong, like they weren't bound by the same rules of gravity as everything else. At first, he thought it was a prank, someone pulling off an elaborate hoax with puppets, or some kind of camera trick, but as he watched them drift across his lawn with an eerie, deliberate grace, a gnawing terror began to settle deep in his gut. These things were real. He blinked, hoping the figures would vanish in a trick of the light, but they remained. They moved in tandem, slowly crossing the yard without sound, without any visible purpose. It was like they were passing through, completely indifferent to their surroundings. Just watching them stirred something primal inside him, a deep, animalistic fear that he couldn't explain. David quickly checked the door locks and ran to the window to see if he could spot them in person, but by the time he got there, the backyard was empty. He replayed the footage over and over, but it only deepened his unease. They were unlike anything he could rationalize, too surreal to be human, yet too tangible to be some glitch in the system. Over the next few days, David couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Every creak of the house, every rustle of the wind outside felt charged. On the 4th night, the figures returned. He wasn't watching his phone this time. He woke to the sound of something brushing against the side of his house, like cloth scraping wood. Dread washed over him. His skin prickled with cold sweat as he sat up in bed, staring into the darkness of his room. He didn't need to check the cameras to know they were outside. He could feel them. The figures circled his house, their movements soft but deliberate. David lay frozen, barely breathing, afraid that any sound might draw them closer. For hours they stayed, their presence pressing in on him, filling the air with something thick and oppressive. Just as dawn began to creep in, they vanished. He never saw them again after that night, but something had changed. David became obsessed with finding answers, scouring forums and paranormal groups, desperate to understand what he had seen. That's when he stumbled across the 2007 footage, the first sighting of what people had started calling the Fresno Nightcrawlers. The 2007 footage was grainy, taken from a similar security camera setup, but the creatures were unmistakable, tall, thin, with those bizarre, elongated legs. In the video, they wandered across the lawn in much the same way David had seen, aimless, unhurried, indifferent to the world around them. The sighting in 2011 only confirmed what David had feared. These things were real, and they had been here before. Cryptid researchers speculated they might be interdimensional beings. Others suggested an elaborate hoax, while some believed they were spirits tied to the land, something ancient, long forgotten. But no one could say for certain. This story is inspired by events that occurred in Fresno, California. In 2007, a man captured security camera footage of strange, thin creatures walking through his yard. The beings, with their long, stilt-like legs and lack of discernible heads or arms, moved fluidly through the space as though gliding. Despite expert analysis, no solid explanation emerged. In 2011, a second sighting by a different witness in Yosemite only fueled the mystery further. Whether these beings were cryptids, spirits, or something else, the Fresno Nightcrawlers remain one of the most chilling and unexplained sightings in recent history.